The human was struggling, yet he outbid a cruel alien to keep four little sisters together. The black market of Nexus Station churned like a hive on the verge of collapse. The press of bodies scaled, furred, armored, or bare-shifted and shouted beneath the flicker of sputtering neon and rust-red emergency lamps. The air reeked of oil and unwashed flesh, tinged with the sharp sting of burned coolant and the metallic tang of fear. Traders haggled over scrap engines and smuggled weapons, their voices colliding with the guttural growls of muscle for hire. Somewhere in the distance, a brawl broke out, the thud of fists on flesh drowned by laughter and jeers. This place was survival's last rung, a bazaar where desperation was priced in credits and blood. Dillon Lynch kept his shoulders square as he shoved through the crowd, sweat already streaking the grime on his brow. His gray tank clung to him, soaked with the residue of a long day crawling through dead ships. The tactical vest strapped across his chest felt more like a joke than protection, its pockets holding the sum total of his life, a busted multi-tool, a handful of credits, and a blaster that hadn't spat a charge in months. He should have been at the docking bay by now, scrounging his way back to his one-person shuttle before hunger and bad luck caught up with him again. But he heard the announcement Section 12, Rare Merchandise. Final call and curiosity tugged. Section 12 was worse than the rest. The corridors narrowed, stalls grew filthier, and the crowd meaner. Merchants didn't bother hiding the chains or the collars here. Dillon kept moving, telling himself he'd just passed through. Then he rounded the corner and stopped cold. On a cracked platform lit by a single failing floodlight stood four small figures. Their bodies were shrouded in coarse-stained fabric, their heads covered by crude paper sacks. Only thin wrists and ankles showed, the skin a delicate azure that shimmered faintly even beneath dirt and bruises. They were motionless, but trembling, bound together by nothing but the fragile grip of their hands. Four cerulean females, croaked the auctioneer, a pink-skinned elder whose sagging chin nearly brushed his chest. His eyes, pupilless and cruel, raked over the crowd. Young, trainable, 2,000 credits for the pair of your choice. Dillon's stomach turned. Ceruleans once, a proud people, gifted in empathy and intelligence, now scattered survivors of a world burned in war. They were supposed to be under galactic protection. Supposed to be. 2-2, barked a tusked brute, his mottled skin a map of scars. Another bidder countered without hesitation. Dillon should have walked. He had nothing, no plan, no credits to spare. But then he heard it, a sound so small it nearly vanished beneath the roar of the market. A muffled sob from beneath one of the sacks. A tiny hand reached blindly for another, fingers clutching in desperate refusal to be parted. The trader's voice cut through. Sisters must be separated. More profit that way. Tallest two final call at 3,000 credits. The tusked alien grunted, lifting his credit sheet. Satisfaction gleamed in his eyes. Dillon felt something snap inside him. His pulse hammered as his voice rose above the crowd. 3,500. Heads turned. Silence rippled outward. The auctioneer's lips curled into a cruel smile. For which pair, human? Dillon swallowed hard. His throat was dry, his mind screaming at him to shut up and walk away. But he forced the words out anyway. All four of them. The market erupted in laughter, harsh and mocking. The trader sneered. A price for all four is 6,000 minimum. You insult me with scraps. 3,500 is all I have. Dillon held up his credit sheet, his last fragile tether to survival. Take it, or I call station security and report sentient trafficking. It was a bluff. Security in this sector was bought and blind. But for the briefest flicker, doubt shadowed the trader's eyes. The tusked brute growled, tusks flashing as he shoved forward. Dillon didn't back down. His heart was a drumbeat in his chest. but he kept his voice steady. Not a threat, a promise. The trader snatched the chit, verified the sum, and spat on the ground. Take them and go. But watch your back. Human, you've made enemies today. The crowd parted, muttering, glaring, some amused, others angry. Dylan stepped onto the platform, hands unsteady as he reached for the paper sacks. One by one, he pulled them free. 4 pairs of luminous silver eyes blinked up at him, wide and wet with tears. Faces too young to have known chains, framed by hair that shimmered like starlight even under the filthy lamps. The tallest girl couldn't have been more than 12 in human years. The smallest, no older than 6. They stared at him, fear and hope colliding in their fragile expressions. Dylan's chest tightened. He'd just gambled his future away, fuel, food, even the slim chance of survival, all gone. But when the oldest girl's trembling hand reached for his, he took it without hesitation. It's okay, he said softly, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. You're coming with me. All of you. Together. The crowd's eyes burned into his back as he led the 4 sisters away. His pockets were empty, his enemies many, and his future uncertain. But their small fingers clung to him as if he was the only anchor they had left in a galaxy that wanted to tear them apart. And maybe, just maybe, that was reason enough. The corridors beyond Section 12 pressed close, metal walls slick with condensation and graffiti layered over rust. Dylan pushed forward, the 4 girls trailing like fragile shadows. Their thin shoes scraped against the grating, too worn to soften each step. He kept glancing back, half expecting the tusked brute or one of Morton's enforcers to appear from the crowd. The youngest stumbled first. She was small, her azure legs trembling beneath the weight of exhaustion. Without thinking, Dylan scooped her up, surprised at how light she felt. The girl's arms clung around his neck, her paper sack dress scratching his skin. He caught her eyes silver, wide, and uncertain, and offered the faintest smile. You'll be all right, kiddo. I've got you. The eldest, taller than the rest, moved close at his side. She carried herself stiffly, as if forcing her body to stand between Dylan and her sisters. Where are you taking us? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. My ship, Dylan said, though he almost choked on the word. Ship was a generous description. The rusty nail was more salvage than StarCraft, patched with hull plates that never quite sealed, and an engine that coughed like a dying animal. Still, it was the only place he could think of. The girl's silver gaze studied him. I'm Linda. This is Arda, Nova, and Celeste. She tilted her head toward the 3 younger ones, her voice carrying a protective sharpness. We are sisters. We stay together. Dylan nodded, the weight of what he'd done settling heavier by the step. Together. I promise. They turned down a service corridor, its floor sticky with leaked coolant. Dylan's ears caught the low growl of voices echoing behind him. He cursed under his breath. The tusked bidder wasn't letting this go. Keep close, he hissed. Hands together. Eyes down. The girls obeyed instantly, gripping one another like a chain of trembling links. Dylan moved quickly, ducking into an access hatch he knew well. The tunnels beyond were narrow, hot, filled with the constant hum of machinery. For years he had crawled these spaces, repairing busted conduits, rerouting failing power. Now those wasted years gave him an edge. He knew the shortcuts. He knew how to vanish. The girls panted in the heat, sweat streaking their azure skin. Arda, the second oldest, finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why did you? Why did you take us? Dylan hesitated. He could have lied, could have said he needed help, or owed someone a debt. Instead, the truth came out, simple and bare. Because no one else would. Arda's small lips pressed together, as though testing the weight of his answer. She gave no reply, but her hand tightened on her younger sister's fingers. They pushed deeper into the tunnels. The smell of coolant and scorched circuits was almost suffocating. Dylan adjusted Celeste's weight in his arms. The little one had gone quiet, her face pressed against his chest. Yet he felt something strange, electric-like warmth radiating from her touch. For a moment, his exhaustion eased. The echo of boots clanged through the passage behind them. Dylan's gut twisted. He'd been right. They were being followed. He ducked into a side corridor, nearly colliding with a figure moving in the opposite direction. Strong hands caught his shoulders, steadying him before he could fall. "Watch where you're—" Dylan started, then froze. The woman before him shimmered in the dim light. Her skin was a luminous silver, her long ash-white hair cascading like liquid metal. An indigo suit clung to her frame, threaded with metallic seams that caught every flicker of the emergency lights. And her eyes, deep violet, flecked with gold, narrowed at the sight of the cerulean children clutching Dylan's hands. "Ceruleans," she breathed, her voice melodic, stunned. Her gaze snapped to Dylan, sharp and assessing. "How did you—" Dylan tightened his grip on Celeste. "I bought them," he said defensively. "To keep them together." Some pink-skinned bastard was splitting them up. Her expression softened for a fraction of a second. Then her eyes hardened. "Morton. I've been tracking him for months." She crouched to the girl's level, her movements graceful, deliberate. "I am Celine. I'm Lunari. My people were allies of the Ceruleans before." She trailed off, a shadow passing across her face. Linda stepped in front of her sisters, chin raised. "We don't know you." Celine inclined her head with respect. "You're wise to be cautious." She straightened, her eyes flicking to Dylan. "You're being followed. Morton doesn't take kindly to losing merchandise." "Tell me something I don't know," Dylan muttered. He shifted Celeste higher on his hip. "I'm trying to reach my ship, but his thugs are already cutting off the way." Celine's lips curved into something halfway between a smirk and a challenge. "Then follow me. I know paths even Morton fears to tread." Dylan's instinct screamed against it. He trusted no one. Trust had ruined him once already. But the weight of Celeste in his arms, the silent plea in Linda's eyes, made the choice for him. "Lead the way," he said. Celine turned, her silver form gliding down the tunnel with purpose. Dylan followed, the sisters close at his heels. For the first time, the mechanic realized the truth. This wasn't about scraps of salvage anymore. He wasn't just drifting through the galaxy. He had just taken responsibility for 4 fragile lives, and maybe, against all sense, found an ally who could help him keep them alive. The tunnels twisted beneath. Nexus Station like a labyrinth of steel arteries, each one vibrating with the pulse of hidden machinery. Dylan kept one arm wrapped around Celeste, while the other hovered near his useless blaster, his boots clanging softly on the grated floor as he followed the silver-skinned stranger. The other 3 girls clung together, their small feet hurrying to match his longer stride. Ahead, Celine moved with uncanny confidence, her pale hair gleaming in the dim light, every step deliberate and fluid. "You're sure this isn't a dead end?" Dylan muttered, his voice carrying more edge than he intended. Celine glanced over her shoulder, violet eyes flashing. "Trust me, human. I've walked these paths in darker hours than this." She tapped the wall with her palm, and a concealed panel slid open, revealing a narrow shaft that sloped upward. "Come, Morton's thugs won't follow through diplomatic routes." Dylan barked a humorless laugh. "Diplomatic? That's not a word I've heard in years." But he went first, crouching low as he ushered the girls inside. The metal walls of the shaft were slick with condensation, the air warmer here, charged with the low hum of power lines hidden beneath plating. Dylan adjusted Celeste's weight. She had grown quiet again, but the warmth radiating from her small body against his chest lingered. It was strange, like the echo of someone else's heartbeat inside his own. When they emerged, the space around them shifted. Gone was the stink of rust and oil. The corridor ahead gleamed with polished alloy. Real lighting panels washed the passage in steady white glow, softened by vertical gardens that clung to the walls. Actual greenery spilled from hydroponic recesses. The faint smell of damp earth, a startling contrast to the metallic stench Dylan had grown used to. "This is the diplomatic quarter," Celine said, striding ahead. "Security is tighter here. Morton's hunters will think twice." Linda's silver eyes scanned the greenery with awe, her hand tightening protectively around Arda's. Nova, wide-eyed, tried to reach toward one of the glowing vines before Linda pulled her back sharply. "Don't touch anything," the eldest hissed. Dylan almost smiled at the small exchange. These kids had survived horrors he could only guess at, but they still looked at flowers like they were miracles. A sudden vibration shuddered through the floor. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. Celine's expression darkened as she checked a small console recessed into the wall. "Morton works quickly. His enforcer must already be in pursuit." "Enforcer?" Dylan asked. Her gaze flicked to him, serious and sharp. "Drax, a voidborn, merciless. He does not lose his prey." As if on cue, a low tremor rolled through Dylan's bones. A hunter's presence even before it was seen. He swallowed hard, pushing the sensation aside. "Then we move faster." They hurried through the gleaming corridor until they reached a private hangar. The doors hissed open to reveal a vessel unlike anything Dylan had ever laid eyes on. Sleek lines, hull panels shimmering with a faint indigo sheen, engines humming with contained power. The Star Dancer, she called it, pride evident in her tone. Dylan guided the sisters up the ramp, his boots clanging on the polished deck plates. The ship's interior felt alive, adjusting its lighting subtly to match the cerulean's sensitive eyes. For a fleeting second, Dylan thought they might actually be safe. Then the alarms blared. Celine cursed softly, her fingers dancing across a control panel. "They've locked on. Krell Hunter class. That means Drax." Dylan set Celeste gently down, her small hands clutching at his vest even as he pulled away. "Get us moving." "I'm already ahead of you," Celine snapped, her grace sharp with urgency as she guided the ship off the deck. The Star Dancer shuddered as clamps released and the stars opened. Beyond the bay, the radar lit up with a hostile blip closing fast. Dylan's pulse spiked. "That's military grade." "Morton's rolling deep for a slaver." "Morton isn't just a slaver," Celine replied grimly. "His connections run to the hegemony itself." The Star Dancer surged forward, but the Krell vessel loomed behind, its silhouette a predator against the void. Warning shots streaked past, rattling the hull. Dylan grabbed the co-pilot's seat, his hands moving instinctively over controls. "Divert power from weapons to forward shields," he barked. "Kill everything non-essential. Run silent." Celine blinked but complied, her violet eyes cutting toward him. "You know these systems?" "Know them? Lady, I've kept worse ships alive with duct tape and prayer." He yanked the helm, guiding the vessel toward the jagged silhouette of an asteroid field dot. The girls cried out as the ship lurched violently, but Dylan gritted his teeth, threading them between massive rocks that turned like titans in the void. Warning klaxons blared. Debris scraped past their shields. The Krell Hunter followed, firing bursts that exploded into showers of molten shards. Dylan's hands were steady, his focus razor-sharp. The ship seemed to respond to him, each adjustment of the controls flowing like second nature. He dove through narrow canyons of stone, twisting, juking, making the hunter's shots work against them as debris blinded its sensors. Celine watched him, her lips parting in astonishment. "You pilot like you were born to it. Necessity. Dylan said without looking at her. Out here, you learn fast or you die faster. A close strike sent the ship rattling, hurling Celine against his shoulder. For a heartbeat she remained there, her body pressed against his. Dylan felt a surge of heat that had nothing to do with the fight outside. Their eyes met, a silent current flowing between them, even as alarms wailed. Behind them, Celeste's small voice broke through the chaos, soft but certain. He won't let us fall. Dylan felt her words in his mind as much as in his ears. A flood of trust, of fragile hope, surged through him. His grip on the controls tightened, his jaw set. Hold on, he growled. I'll get us out. And for the first time in years, he believed it. The Star Dancer slipped from the asteroid field like a knife cutting free of bone, its engines rumbling low as the stars spread open again. For a moment, silence held. No weapons fire, no rattling impacts, no alarms. Just the faint hum of the ship and the sound of 4 children breathing in unsteady unison. Dylan leaned back in the co-pilot's chair, hands trembling from the tight grip he'd kept on the controls. They broke off pursuit, Celine murmured, her voice caught somewhere between relief and wonder. Your maneuver worked. Dylan rubbed a hand across his stubbled jaw. I told you. Belt salvage teaches you a thing or two about flying through rocks. He risked a glance at her. In the soft blue glow of the console, her silver skin shimmered like moonlight on water. For a second too long, he didn't look away. Her lips curved slightly, a flicker of warmth breaking through her guarded composure. But then her eyes hardened, fixed on the scanner. Don't relax yet. They'll be back, and next time they won't underestimate us. She adjusted the controls, setting a course. We'll hide in the Veil Nebula. Its ion storms blind most sensors. It will buy us time. Dylan turned his gaze to the viewport as the faint shimmer of violet gas clouds began to grow in the distance. The Veil. He'd heard of its spacer myths about ghost ships and ancestors whispering through the storms. He'd never thought he'd be desperate enough to seek refuge in a place like that. When the Star Dancer crossed into the nebula, the universe shifted. Violet mists curled against the hull, shot through with streaks of emerald lightning. The gas glowed faintly, painting the interior in otherworldly hues. It was beautiful and unsettling all at once, like sailing through the auroras of a haunted sky. Behind them, the sisters huddled near a viewport, their silver eyes wide. Nova reached a tentative hand toward the glass, as though she could touch the colors. Arda whispered something Dylan didn't catch, but Linda hushed her quickly, wrapping her arms around both. Celeste lingered apart, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her gaze locked on Dylan. He tried not to notice at first. But when he finally met her eyes, something jolted through him, a warmth that wasn't his own, a pulse of feeling like water slipping into cracks. Fear, trust, exhaustion, hope all tangled into one surge that left him blinking. What the hell? Dylan muttered under his breath. Linda caught the movement, her voice low and tense. She's bonding with you. Dylan stared, throat dry. Bonding? Ceruleans form empathic links, Linda explained. With family. With blood. Never with outsiders. She looked away, almost afraid. It's sacred. Before Dylan could reply, the ship rocked sharply as turbulence from the nebula jolted them sideways. He caught himself on the console. When he looked back, Celeste was on her feet, trembling but steady, her small hands reaching toward him, and he felt it again stronger this time. The certainty of her faith in him, radiating through their strange connection. A fragile thread, binding her heart to his. Celine's gaze had sharpened as she watched. Impossible, she whispered, though her tone carried awe instead of denial. A cross-species empathic bond. Dylan Lynch, what are you? He opened his mouth, then closed it, because the truth was simple. He was a man who'd lost everything. A mechanic with grease-stained hands and no place in the galaxy. A drifter who'd thrown away his last credits for 4 children he couldn't protect. But in Celeste's wide silver eyes, he saw none of that. He saw something terrifying in beautiful belief. "I'm just human," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The nebula's light shimmered across Celine's silver skin as she turned back to the controls, her expression unreadable. Then perhaps humanity has depths the galaxy has yet to reckon with. Dylan let the words hang in the air as the Star Dancer cut deeper into the veil. Outside, the storm crackled and whispered. Inside, a bond had formed where none should have existed, changing the course of every life on board. And somewhere behind them, far beyond the glowing clouds, Morton and his enforcer would not rest until that bond was broken. The Veil Nebula thinned into shadow, revealing a pale moon scarred with craters and streaked with iron dust. The Star Dancer angled toward it, engines humming low as if wary of disturbing the silence of the place. Dylan stood behind Celine's chair, arms crossed, watching the outpost rise into view, a derelict mining station clinging to the barren surface like a rusted parasite. Its antennae jutted skyward, broken but still tall, and the faint glow of emergency lights pulsed from its skeletal framework. "This is it?" Dylan asked, his tone somewhere between doubt and resignation. Celine's violet eyes flicked up to him. "Abandoned for a decade. Atmosphere recyclers barely functioning. But the communications hub is intact. We can make it look like a hidden cerulean sanctuary." "Morton won't resist," Dylan huffed. "Bait a slaver with the promise of more profit. Sounds suicidal. Sometimes suicide is the only way forward," Celine replied, her voice calm, steady. Then softer. "Unless you'd rather keep running until our fuel dies." Dylan shook his head. Running had never been his strong suit. Fixing, fighting, improvising, that was who he was. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine. Let's turn this wreck into a fortress." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, and soon the crew, if you could call this makeshift family that was scattered across the dusty corridors of the outpost. Dylan got to work first, stripping broken terminals and repurposing coils. Nova shadowed him, her small hands eager to hold tools too big for her. When she managed to fit a cracked coupler into place, Dylan gave her a rare grin. "Not bad, kid," he said. "Might make a mechanic out of you yet." Nova's face lit up, and for the first time, Dylan saw a spark of joy untainted by fear. Elsewhere, Linda stood watch near the safe room Dylan had rigged from a reinforced storage bay. She kept Arda close, whispering sharp instructions about escape routes and signals. Dylan overheard her once, her voice carrying more maturity than her years. "If anything happens, you run to the rusty nail. You don't wait for me." Arda protested, but Linda's tone brooked no argument. Celeste stayed near Dylan, quiet as always. She didn't speak much, but he felt her presence more than he saw it. Her bond pressed against him like a second pulse, feeding him fragments of her emotions. Her curiosity when she watched Nova tinker, her fear when the air vents groaned too loud, her fragile trust when he brushed her silver hair from her face. Celine oversaw the larger picture. With precise gestures, she calibrated the Cum array, feeding false signals into the void-encrypted cerulean distress calls that painted a story of 15 refugees hiding here, children among them. She was ruthless in her detail, every syllable chosen to dig at Morton's greed. When the system crackled to life, Dylan stood beside her. "He'll come," he said grimly. "Yes," Celine replied, her silver skin gleaming in the pale glow of the monitors. "And he'll bring his army." Hours bled away in preparation. Dylan rigged jury-rigged explosives for mining charges, funneled corridors with proximity traps, and rerouted emergency power to bulkhead doors. His mind ticked with precision, every scrap of knowledge from his salvaging days pressed into service. By the time he wiped the sweat from his brow, the outpost felt less like a ruin and more like a loaded spring. Celine found him in the supervisor's office, where he'd collapsed onto a dusty chair. She leaned against the console, her eyes soft despite the weight of what was coming. "You plan for the worst," she said quietly, "but you still hope for the best." "That's very human." Dylan chuckled without humor. "I'm not some noble hero, Celine. I was just too damn stubborn to walk away." She studied him for a long moment, then reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. The touch lingered, electric. "That stubbornness might change more than you realize." Before Dylan could answer, the console at their side pinged. Incoming ships. 3 signatures. 1 massive, 2 smaller escorts. "They're here," Celine whispered. Dylan rose, his exhaustion burned away by the surge of purpose. He tapped his comm. "Linda, status?" "All systems green," came the girl's steady reply. "Safe room sealed. Celeste says you're worried, but confident." Dylan managed a smile. "Tell her she's right. Stay sharp, kid." He and Celine exchanged a look, one that held more than tactics, something fragile, dangerous, inevitable. Then she turned to the controls, her voice hard again. "Morton's bringing his whole hand to the table." Dylan picked up his blaster, now patched and humming with barely reliable power. His jaw set. "Good. Let's show him the cost of dealing in lives." Through the viewport, Morton's sleek personal cruiser descended, its hull gleaming like a predator's teeth. Behind it, the escorts touched down, unloading armed mercenaries. At the forefront, towering above them all, stepped Drax the Voidborn, his gray skin absorbing the light, his black eyes promising nothing but violence. The trap was set. The storm was coming. And for the first time in years, Dylan Lynch felt ready to face it. The mining outpost groaned as the weight of Morton's forces pressed inside. Bulkhead doors slammed shut on Dylan's command, cutting squads into isolated pockets of metal corridors. Sparks showered from improvised charges as mercenaries scrambled for cover. The air filled with shouts, the hiss of plasma bolts, and the thundering roar of Morton's enforcer at the vanguard. From the command alcove, Dylan and Celine watched the feeds flicker with chaos. Drax's hulking form moved like a shadow through the smoke, his black eyes glinting each time the cameras caught him. He slammed a mercenary aside when one faltered, his growling voice carrying even through the static. "Find the human. Bring me the sisters." "Now," Dylan hissed. Celine triggered the first sequence. The floor beneath a half-dozen mercenaries collapsed, dropping them screaming into a containment pit Dylan had wired with magnetic restraints. In the west corridor, an EMP charge pulsed, weapons sparking uselessly in mercenary hands. Knockout gas filled another passage, leaving Morton's best thrashing before they slumped silent. But Drax didn't slow. He ripped a bulkhead open with brute force, emerging into a chamber just 1 corridor away from Dylan's position. "Too strong," Celine said, her voice low but hard. "He'll break through everything you've built." Dylan tightened his grip on his patched blaster. "Then I'll hold him." He slipped into the maintenance shafts, the metal cold under his palms. Each clang of his boots echoed with memories, years of scavenging, years of crawling in places no one else dared. He emerged in a side passage, just as Drax thundered into view. The Voidborn's shadow swallowed the corridor, his jagged teeth bared in a cruel grin. "The human who thinks himself clever," Drax growled. "Morton will flay you slowly, and I'll enjoy every sound you make." Dylan didn't answer. He triggered the charge he'd hidden above the archway. Explosives brought down a rain of stone and steel, sealing Drax between them. But Dylan knew it wouldn't hold. He sprinted toward the processing chamber, heart-hammering dot inside. Celine had Morton cornered. The pink-skinned slaver trembled but spat venom, his sagging jowls quivering. Do you have any idea who I serve? The hegemony itself sanctions my work. I am untouchable. Celine's pistol never wavered. You are very touchable, Morden, and you'll confess to all of it. The slaver lunged with a hidden weapon, a desperate crack of energy catching Dylan in the shoulder as he burst into the room. Pain flared white-hot, but he stayed standing, raising his blaster to fire back. The bolt tore through Morton's leg, dropping the slaver with a squeal. The chamber shook with a thunderous crash. Drax tore free of the collapsed corridor, metal screaming around him. He charged, faster than his size should allow, and his hand closed around Dylan's throat. The Voidborn lifted him with ease, black eyes burning with sadistic pleasure. Fragile, Drax sneered. So fragile, Dylan's vision blurred, breath strangled. Celine moved to fire, but Morton lunged at her with feral desperation, forcing her into a melee she couldn't break free from. Dylan's weapon clattered to the floor, his strength fading. Then he felt it. Celeste. Her presence crashed into him like a tide. Fear, desperation, but also unyielding love. And beneath it, her sisters. Linda's steel resolve, Arda's trembling courage, Nova's spark of stubborn hope. Together, their emotions braided into his mind, flooding him with impossible strength. Dylan roared, twisting in Drax's grip. He wrenched at the alien's wrists, his muscles surging with borrowed will. With a savage headbutt, he smashed his forehead into Drax's jagged face. The Voidborn stumbled, surprised. Dylan hit the ground hard, but rolled, snatching his blaster and firing point-blank. One shot staggered Drax. The second sent him reeling. The third dropped the monster to his knees, howling in fury before collapsing against the support column with a final crash. On the other side of the chamber, Celine drove her knee into Morton's chest, forcing him down. She bound his hands with lunari restraints, his shrill curses echoing off steel. Dylan staggered upright, his shoulder bleeding, his breath ragged. But Celeste's warmth pulsed through him, dulling the pain, healing with every small touch of her bond. Morton spat blood, his voice a rasp. You fools! The hegemony will never let this stand. Ceruleans are not children. They are resources. Dylan crouched, his silver-lit eyes meeting Morton's with quiet fury. They are people, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure the galaxy remembers that. Morton's sneer faltered. For the first time, true fear flickered in his gaze. Hours later, aboard the Star Dancer, the slaver lay bound in the brig. Evidence streamed across secure channels, reaching Lunari diplomats who could no longer remain neutral. Across the nebula, a chain of consequence had begun. In the quiet of the observation deck, Dylan stood with Celine as the sisters slept in their safe room. She leaned close, her silver skin glowing in the nebulous hues. You've changed everything, she whispered. Dylan shook his head. I'm just a mechanic who couldn't walk away. But even as he said it, he felt Celeste stir in her dreams. The bond shimmered, carrying a final truth. His reckless compassion had revealed something more. Humanity wasn't empty of gifts. Hidden within them was resonance empathic potential no one had believed possible. And that, Dylan realized, was the true shock. He hadn't just saved 4 sisters. He had uncovered a secret that might unite worlds against the Empire, built on their suffering. He reached for Celine's hand, their fingers intertwining. For the first time in years, Dylan Lynch didn't feel like a drifter. He felt like a man with something worth fighting for.